Hello and welcome to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton, and welcome back to the Toffee Blues podcast. I'm joined as usual by Harry. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, man, I'm good. I feel like we'll get into it, of course, but it's always a big week, isn't it? The build up to Derby week. And obviously with us seemingly doing quite well at the moment and not a lot to grumble about, and the other lot somehow not playing as well, but having even less to grumble about. It's a really interesting dynamic on Merseyside, isn't it? That I'm really excited to get into with you this week. How are you doing?
Well, I'll be honest, they're two of my least favorite weeks of the year. If I'm honest, the build up I find worse than the actual match. The nerves really start to kick in. Particularly I think the ones at Anfield. It's something about being there when they've been at Goodison, or obviously when they're going to be at Brandywell this season. It feels it don't I don't get as nervous for some reason, but it's
Mm.
when it's on telly and stuff like that. When doing all the pre-match build-up and stuff like that, it really starts to kick in. And already 2 days before, I can feel it a little bit in the pit of my stomach, to be honest. But
Oh
so
my goodness.
I kind of want to put it off, and we'll start chronologically and look back before we look forward. And as you say, focus on the positives going into this, and that we're still playing really well. And obviously,
Yeah.
we sat here last week and said. Um, as poorly as Villa have started the season, we will have to do well to get something against them on Saturday. And I think both of us would have happily taken a draw if we'd been
Yeah.
asked this time last week. And yet, I think we're sat here now having got a draw, thinking really probably should have won that. I imagine you feel similar to me in that sense.
Yeah, look, Villa are our bogey team. There's no doubt about that. I think we talked about it on the pod last week. I think if you consume any kind of Everton content, you'll know that there's two certainties since Aston Villa came back to the Premier League that Everton will struggle to take 3 points from them, and Didu Martinez will have his best game of the season. And again, had he have been sold on deadline day, had there have been some period of reintegration, I think Everton would have won that game comfortably at the weekend. I think whilst it is disappointing, having looked back on that game, it's disappointing to look at a 0-0. I think if we do take the positives, and I think it's important at the moment to highlight the positives. Like, I think what was it? We had 19 shots or 19 chances in that game. I thought Grealish looked really dangerous, despite the fact that if you own him in fantasy football at the moment, people are saying he drew a blank. I mean, I think if you watch him for 90 minutes, I think that does him a disservice because I thought he was still creatively brilliant. I do think it makes us sort of reflect on the transfer window a little bit and think about, gosh, we spent all that time focusing on we didn't get a right back, but actually, if we'd got a striker that could finish, we'd be in a very different position as well. But look, I think positively, we're 3 games into the Hill Dickinson Stadium with 3 clean sheets. We are performing a style of football that we could have only dreamed of 2 years ago or a year ago. And Villa, despite where they are currently in the table, are still a side that are chasing European football and have got some very decent players and a very good manager. So you take that all day long and know on another day you'd have come out with 3 points. And maybe it's just because of the game we've got coming up next that everyone would have felt happier had we have got a win. But I just think it's been a really strong start to the season now, and I think we can walk away from all of the games we've played this season thinking that actually this is a very different Everton side that's causing teams a lot of problems.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we spoke about it a little bit last week, but it's reiterates this idea that this is a very different mentality I think this team has now. And as I said, we've spoken so much about how strong Villa's team is, no matter how poorly they might have started the season. It's a side that has cost a lot more money to assemble than ours has, and obviously as much as we love David Moyes, I think we'd all like accept that Unai Emery's a class above in terms of quality of manager, and yet with all of that in mind, I think from the first whistle we looked to take advantage of Villa's poor start, lack of confidence, and from the first whistle, we're just on top. I think there was a
Yeah.
period at the start of the second half where they were on top a little bit, and we were struggling to get the ball out of our own half, but we were able to weather that storm. And after that, really turned it back on them and until the final whistle. It only looked like there was ever going to be one side who was going to win it. Um, and as I say, that mentality of coming out of that game, like thinking we really should have won that and feeling like
Yeah.
disappointed and frustrated with a draw, I think really shows how far we've come along. I think the biggest indication of this will probably come on Saturday, depending on how we approach the derby. You know, again, another typically very difficult fixture for us historically, of course, for the longest time. I don't think Moyes has ever won there. I think with any team, which is obviously makes it very much talk about Villa being a bogey team. I think Liverpool obviously again on a different stratosphere even in that sense. Um, but yeah, like I say, the positives definitely have to be just how much of a threat we look going forward, and again, as little threat as Villa posed, I think we looked a lot more solid defensively last week as well. James Garner
Yeah.
looks like he's played left back all his career now. He looks very solid there. I think Jake O'Brien probably had his best game of the season so far, and Michael Keane again continues to just look as reliable as anything. And again, I'm hesitant to say stuff like this going into the game we're going into, and that as a lot has been made about how in big situations sometimes Keane can crumble under the pressure a little bit. So I really hope that isn't going to be the case on the weekend because. All the signs still seem to be that Brentford still isn't quite ready yet. So I imagine it's going to
Yeah.
be um, Keane and Tarkowski starting again, of course, and Tarkowski as well, another one who's drawn a little bit of criticism so far this season. I thought also looked pretty solid to be honest. Had a few silly fouls given against him, but you could debate all day whether or not they were fouled or not. Don't want to get into the referee performance too much, otherwise it will take up the whole podcast. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's an interesting one, isn't it? Look, we're going to come on to kind of squad selection, looking at the derby and like what changes, if any, would David Moyes make. I think Michael Keane deserves a little bit more airtime than we've given him. I know he's been getting his flowers from elsewhere. I think Jack Grealish aside, he's kind of Everton's understated performer this season, given how many fans were very unhappy that he got a year extension when Branthwaite got injured in pre-season, really kind of worrying like this is exactly why we shouldn't have kept him or exactly why we should have gone and got cover at centre back. But he's playing his part perfectly. There will be a debate whether it happens on this week's podcast or whether it happens when we know from David Moyes that Branthwaite is fit. There will be a debate had on this podcast about who drops out for Branthwaite out of the two at the back. And I know that you'll have a particular opinion. I think I know your answer, and I think it might be the first time on the pod that we sit in separate camps because I think my answer is that Michael Keane, for me, until he puts a foot wrong, should stay. And we'll get into it, I'm sure, at another time, but just very top level for me, why I think that is and why I don't think it would harm him going into the Derby game if even if Branthwaite was on the bench or was fit to play. He's a player where confidence is his biggest kind of curse, but also his biggest blessing. And I feel like if you drop him in form for anybody, the fact that Branthwaite's coming back in, he's one of our best players without a doubt. But if you drop him for Branthwaite, and then when you need him again, is he going to be the Michael Keane we left out or the Michael Keane that we wanted to leave out? If you get what I mean, I think he just has to play until he gives David Moyes a reason not to play him, basically.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I completely get the argument. It was something I posed on the ratings video I recorded a few days ago. But I think, but before anything, I think Keane has definitely already proved why it was the right decision to keep him on for a year. This is exactly what he was signed up for. He's very aware he's a backup option who comes in when one of the two starting centre backs is injured, and he's more than played his role. I think as I say, I think there's no denying that though so far this season he's been the more consistent performer over Tarkowski. And again, a lot has
Yeah.
been made about this because we've seen it all before. We saw it at the start of last season as well, of course, that Tarkowski and Keane don't seem the greatest partnership, but it seems to hinder Tarkowski more than it hinders Keane in a weird sense. Um, and yeah, I'm a lot more on the fence about it than I was. I think people were talking about it a little bit last year based on the same thing, and I think. it was pretty much unanimous. It still probably should be Tarkowski who comes back in. Um, but that was due to just how reliable Tarkowski was still. And I think in the last year that's changed a little bit. It might just be to do with him getting a little bit older, but he's had a few issues with injuries, like which is not like Tarkowski at all. I think at the time we signed him, and obviously we've seen it in his time at Everton as well, that he pretty much never gets injured. He hadn't had a
Yeah,
serious injury before last season in like 7 or 8 years, maybe. It might have been longer than that. I think just hadn't missed a game for Burnley and barely missed a game for us up until last season. So, and I wonder if that plays into it a little bit. If you're a player who's so used to not getting injured, does an injury finally not does an injury when it finally comes along like knock you a little bit? And again at his age as well, in his early 30s, like if you lose that. That yard of pace, he's obviously not the quickest player anyway, but if you lose that extra yard of pace, does it affect you a little bit more and take you a longer time to recover? I'm obviously I'm not at all an expert on this side of things, but it definitely enters into it. I think I'd still be giving Tarkowski a nod purely, I think, for the fact that he's the captain and the
yeah,
fact that him and Bramthwaite have never really put a foot wrong together. I think that's a partnership that's tried and tested, and no one is really too sure how Bramthwaite and Keane would play together. So,
true. Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely maybe a more in-depth conversation to be had at some point. But I think sticking with the whole team selection like dilemmas that there are, and obviously you mentioned it a little bit earlier with the striker situation. I think no one's entirely sure yet who is like the preferred option out of Beto and Barry. Never mind in our minds, but also in Moyes' mind. I'm not entirely sure if he himself has properly made his mind up yet. And I honestly think it kind of depends on the game. I think
Yeah.
on the sort of team we're playing and what's gonna cause them the most issues because as we mentioned they play in very different ways. But yeah, I know Beto drew a lot of frustration on Saturday for myself included, but I do think some of it was a little bit over the top, if I'm being honest. I'm not sure what you made of it.
Yeah, he's a frustrating player. That's as simple as that. We can go back and listen to previous podcast episodes we've done, and he's sort of Everton's new Jekyll and Hyde player, isn't he? Like if he scores a goal, you look at him and you go, oh, he works his socks off. He's gonna get like 8 to 10 goals a season in the Premier League. Like he's gonna lead the line. He's a handful for defenders. You can't fault his work rate. And then you get a game like the Villa game where we've all come away from that feeling we should have won, that a more competent striker would have buried one of those chances. That you've got the likes of like Grealish now and Jai, you've got Dewsbury Hall that are all very much creating chances, probably the most chances that an Everton side has had created per game in years. And you're looking at that and going, I just want someone that's a little bit more ruthless, a little bit more clinical, a little bit more composed. So he is always going to be the catalyst of praise when Everton do well and frustration when Everton don't do well, because his actual approach to a game doesn't change. So it's frustrating, but it's okay if he's on the score sheet. If he scored one and he should have scored three, it's fine as long as Everton win the game or take something from the game. If he doesn't score, which was the case in the 0-0 draw, you're looking at that and going, okay. And I think actually the what I've seen from Everton so far this season, Al, I'd be interested if you agree with me, is we talk a lot with the glimpses we've seen of Barry of he does enough off the ball to create the pockets of space for your Grealishes, for your Ndiayes, for your Dewsbury Halls, for even for James Garner. I think there's been goals scored this season that have come from Barry kind of creating space, and not necessarily, we're not talking about Barry as a he's not scoring goals, he's not getting assists, like he's not in the mix, because actually we're praising him for, well, he's got this creative line behind him now, so he's letting them play through him, and I think that's fine. I think Beto, it's a little bit of like, he doesn't do that, and he sort of gets in the way of that sometimes in that sort of creative flow and the chances of being created. And he sort of desperately wants a goal, so he's sort of not getting out of the way for the others. I think it is just summarized. He's a frustrating watch, but I think more often than not this season he will start. I think, Barry is that raw talent, that unknown entity. I without getting too far ahead of ourselves, I fully expect Beto to start on Saturday, and I'd actually be a bit worried if he threw Barry into that game at Anfield, because I think it's a thankless task playing up front at Anfield. I'd almost be chucking Michael Keane up front at Anfield if Branthwaite was fit, just because no one is going to go there and bag a hat trick. Beto maybe should have last season, by the way, but like that ties into how long we've been having this conversation about Beto. But I do expect Beto to start, and I do think we will say that more often than not this season. I think Barry, looking at our fixtures, we've got the cup game against Wolves on the Tuesday night or the Wednesday night next week. We've got very, very out of form West Ham coming to the Hill Dickinson in the next league game. Maybe that's when Barry's going to get his run. But yeah, I think he's going to go with Beto and sort of the devil he knows rather than the devil he doesn't on Saturday.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's pretty much where I'm at as well. I think Better's game, as you say, is a lot more about goals, and if he doesn't get one, then it looks like a bad performance for him, and I do think you can tell that that plays on his mind a little bit. I've
Yeah,
never I've
yeah,
never really seen a player like properly beat himself up after missing a chance like he does, and similarly when he scores, you can tell it means an awful lot to him, and he's very passionate in his celebrations. I think he does clearly seem to be a player that the mental side of things plays on him a lot, and I think Moyes has recognised this. I think I've spoken about this before, and there's been a few times where Moyes has actually like publicly called him out and said
yeah,
he
yeah,
needs to be seeing more from Beto. And I think a few people have been like, why would you say something like that? But I do genuinely believe Moyes is doing that because that's what he thinks will work for Beto. He's that sort of person who thinks like, right. I'm gonna prove everyone wrong. I've got a point to prove now. I've got a chip on my shoulder, and he thinks that's going to make him play better. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I completely agree. I think he'll definitely start on Saturday as well. I actually thought the hold up play and things like that against Villa wasn't actually as bad as people were making out. I think there was a few times where the ball kind of almost like bounced off him a little bit, but that's only because he got himself into the right position and we were able to retain possession from it. And we all know he's not like the best with the hold up play and can't really do he still doesn't seem to know properly how to actually use his strength. We can all see just how strong he can be from such a physical player. But against someone like Mings, that was always going to be difficult anyway. But I actually thought he coped with it pretty well on Saturday, and it was just the main frustration was probably just from a few times like first touches just weren't coming off. There was that one in the first half, wasn't there, where Tarkowski played like a beautiful ball over the top for him, and he was pretty much in, and the touch let him down. And there was one in the second half as well where he tries to like cut inside and get the shot away, and the touch is just so heavy and the turn is so
Yeah.
slow that a more nimble player would have easily been able to get the shot away there. But yeah, Better just wasn't quite. Just a bit too clunky with it all. So they were the main frustrations. I actually thought his all-round game wasn't too bad, but as you mentioned, that's not really what you put him in the side for. You put him in there to just be like someone who'll get on the end of a cross and just always seems to have a goal in him, constantly running, like stretching the defense. Um, Whereas, as you say, Barry's got more intelligent movement about him and is able to kind of draw defenders away at the right time rather than just basically trying to knacker them and tire them out. And based on, as you say, like even though he didn't get the goal, just based on how many issues he caused Liverpool last season at Anfield, I think you've got to be giving him another go and just hoping that this time locks on our side. But obviously
Oh dear.
that's
That's
that's never a good that's never a good plan to have going into any game with that lot. So yeah, I just want to quickly as well before we'll get on to Liverpool in a second and look ahead to this game. But I just want to quickly mention as well about obviously Merlin Rule don't know
oh
don't know how to pronounce his name yet, but obviously. he came on for his debut towards the end of the game against Villa as well, and looked pretty tidy. I saw a lot of
Yeah,
people. We our fans have a tendency to do this a little bit, where we get a little glimpse at a player and he looks amazing, and you know, if say he starts on Saturday and struggles, it's obviously going to go completely the opposite direction. And I think he's just a solid enough option. I think that's what he proved to me on Saturday, that he's capable of playing in the Premier League. Might still, you know, need a bit of, you know, getting used to things a little bit, but I think he'll start on Saturday because Iwabuna's performance worried me a little bit against, you know, more I guess more talented players in Villa compared to, you know, some of the teams we played earlier this season where he's looked okay.
yeah.
Yeah, just the same criticisms that have been levied against him, you know, kind of like unintelligent positioning and things like that seem to rear their head again a little bit. So I think you want the more experienced player in role roles, whatever it is, in midfield on Saturday. That is, of course, if Mikalenko's not fit again, and moving on to Liverpool, that's a big part of how well I think we might do there because I think that structure you do really need. James Garner being able to move back into the midfield would really help things out. Um, and we've seen so many times over the years, Mikalenko's able to is someone who just seems to be able to keep Salah quiet for the most part. And obviously
Yeah.
he still manages to find a way to score a lot of the games, but he never seems to like properly be terrorizing us during a game. Whenever Mikalenko's there, he's usually able to keep him in check. So hopefully he's fit on Saturday because I think that will go a long way to helping us get a more positive result.
Yeah, Mikalenko's an interesting one, isn't he? He's certainly had an Everton career where one week he's a bit like Beto, I guess, like one or maybe not so one week to the next, but sort of month to month, it feels like he has very strong months and then very sort of like average months. And his fitness record as the last couple of seasons has been a bit of an interesting one, hasn't it? I think he's had a couple that have like kept him out of some key games, and you obviously with Everton being relatively short in when it comes to fullbacks and liking to buy one and play them till they're 42 and then still offer them a 1 year deal. I think like we're in a situation where like Mikalenko's in the twilight zone for another 20 years of his career right now. But like I do worry with that. I absolutely hear what you're saying. I think if James Garner had to play at left back at the weekend, it wouldn't worry me. I think he's done very well there. I think David Moyes obviously only has like one wish left on his like magic fullback genie lamp, with like Jake O'Brien magically being a right back and now James Garner magically being a left back. Again, I Obviously, he's got Adam Asnou, who seems to be getting some match fitness, but that is not a game where I expect Adam Asnou to get a minute unless we're 4-0 up with 4 minutes to go. And even then,
And
it'd be
even
a
then,
flip of a coin. Yeah, even then, Everton that. But yeah, I do think, yeah, you're absolutely right. If Mikalenko's fit, he has to start because he's the starting left back of Everton Football Club. But just I want to circle back just very briefly, tie it all together. That the comment you made about Merlin Roll, I think the thing that gives me the most hope about Everton this season, aside from Jack Grealish, is that for me we have options now, and they might not have been the options we thought we were going to have, or the options that we thought the squad had. So Mikalenko gets injured. I don't have an issue with James Garner at left back. Idrissa Gana Gueye goes off to AFCON. I don't have an issue with Merlin Roll playing in midfield. If Njai goes away to AFCON, we've still got to see what Tyler Dibling can do in an Everton shirt. He has got options and weirdly kind of interesting depth that I don't think we had before. And last season, if we talked about Ndai getting injured and it was like Lindstrom or Harrison that were going to have to play there in their place, eyes would roll. Irabunan would have had to have come in if Idrissa Gana Gueye was out, and eyes would have rolled or eyebrows would have been raised. And so I think there is some kind of like interesting depth there going into the game on Saturday. I think before we get into it, position to position, or kind of what I would do or what you would do, Moyes is an old school Premier League manager. That the squad that he put out against Villa, if fit, will be the squad that plays against Liverpool. I don't think he's a chopper and a changer. It will just be a question of if anyone that was out for that Villa game is fit and can play in the Liverpool game for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. The team basically picks itself at the moment, particularly in the midfield area. Obviously you have to have Grealish on the left and Jai on the right. Dewsbury Hall's got to keep playing. Okay, Idrissa Gueye next to him as well. So yeah, it's only a case of, I think, moving James Garner if he's fit, if Mikalenko is fit, say, and then obviously we don't expect Brentford to be back quite yet. And yeah, if Mikalenko isn't fit, I agree. I'd probably stick with the same team with the exception of Rule coming in for Irabunum. I think that's about as straightforward as it can be, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? More, we know Moyes likes to work with a small squad, and we also know that he maybe was one or two short of what he wanted for this Everton squad. He started changing his messaging, of course, to we're not going to fix it all in one window. He's got injuries there that we obviously you don't anticipate having, but you know are probably going to come at some stage in the season. You're right that the team picks itself, and I think again that will be the case more often than not this season. You know, he'll get a bit of a headache if Branthwaite suddenly could complete 60 minutes. But would you want to risk that? You know, right now, I don't know. I don't think you'd unsettle that back line. Obviously, even Mikalenko coming back, unless you tell me he's 100% fit and can get through the 90, the last thing you want is to throw him back in and he get a nasty one and Garner have to kind of move out and roll coming cold. Like, there's all these things, isn't there? You don't really want to mess about with it too much. And he's got the cup game to kind of do some level of rotation. So again, yeah, I'd like to see what Roll can do. He will be a bit of an unknown entity, I think, for Liverpool. I think a lot of our squad is quite scoutable in the sense of they've played a fair few games at the Premier League level. You know, everyone knows who Jack Grealish is. Everyone knows what Jack Grealish looks like in this Everton team. I think every player is pretty scoutable. I think Merlin Roll will be quite an unknown entity. I think Everton fans are struggling to predict what he'll do on the ball in the best way possible. So I think you'd hope that Liverpool would have that same problem. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one. But I maybe get the feeling that he'll risk Mikalenko and bring Garner through again. I think he trusts. I think once you earn David Moyes' trust, you can pretty much have a job for life, right? I
Hmm.
think until you've earned his trust, and to earn your trust, someone has to get injured or sold, so or go off to AFCON. So yeah, it might be that Garner just kind of moves back, but if not, hopefully Merlin Roll can have a good game. And if he can't, by the way, to go back to a point you made earlier, if he can't have a good game at Anfield, this game, prepare the rage comments in the video, by the way. But you know, this game is a free hit for Everton Football Club, and it has been for my lifetime. I'm 32 years old. Like, it has been a free hit in all of my lifetime. We do not turn up there, even if we were on a run of 8 games unbeaten. We would not turn up there banking on 3 points, right? There's a whole podcast or YouTube series waiting to happen on psychology at Everton Football Club and why that's the case, but neither of us are qualified to lead that particular show, so we'll stick to this one instead. But I do feel like this is a free hit. So if a player goes there on Saturday and has a bad game or doesn't get an assist or Grealish doesn't get a hat trick, we don't write anybody off. This is still a good start to the season. And the Wolves game and the West Ham game are very nice games to kind of come off of whatever Saturday's result is. So for me, just like let's just stick with a team for a little bit, like, and whatever the vibe is. I might be wrong. We might all turn up, have an absolute stinker, lose heavy, and we sit here on the next pod and go, yeah, it weren't good enough, was it? But you know what? If everyone rocks up, as we have done in previous seasons, by the way, we're organised, everyone tries to do their job, and we just get a bit unlucky or we get a bit outskilled or whatever. The money they've spent versus the money we've spent, I'm sorry, like it's a free hit. And I think we've got to be mindful of that and not start lynching players, throwing players under the bus. I don't want to see any bed sheets with Beto's name on it off the back of the game on Saturday. So my rally cry to everyone is let's just kind of stay calm, as hard as that is to do, by the way, with this lot. But like, let's just try and stay a little bit calm on it because I think there is early signs of something quite special happening this season, Al, and I don't want an early Merseyside derby to kind of derail any positivity that we've got going on with the club.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you have to go back to probably the Benitez reign when they thumped us at Goodison.
Yeah,
The last time we rolled over against Liverpool, and I honestly think, especially at Anfield, that's all we can expect. Just give it a go, and
yeah,
if we lose by the odd goal, which it seems to be the pattern it follows every year at Anfield the last few seasons. We hold out for a long time, in the second half they finally grind us down because, as you say, they've got so much in that team that we just don't have, and the amount of money they've spent this summer to make it even more formidable, which it's to be expected, honestly. So we just need to give a good account of ourselves. And I'd like to think for the majority that will be enough. So. Yeah, I'm just quickly going back to Royal as well. Again, with all the players as well, there should be no jumping on backs based on performances in this one. But I do agree in that he's a bit of an unknown entity to us as well. With no one's entirely sure what sort of role he's going to play for us either.
Yeah.
This new lad, obviously, I think he was mainly used as a kind of box to box at Freiburg, from what I've read. But apparently, he looks like he might be like in the more sitting sort of role that James Garner and Iwabuna have kind of been playing this season. So that'll be interesting to see. And obviously, if no one's ever really seen him play like that, how do you possibly scout that as an opposition? So, um, it's the worst part about doing these previews, but I'm gonna have to ask you for a prediction. Um, yeah, go for
I
it.
mean, I'm not putting money on it, am I? So it's again, there's free hit. As I've said, the game is on Saturday, as is my prediction. Because there isn't a lot of jeopardy on me giving it to you. I'm gonna kind of hark back to kind of the Phil Jagielka last minute screamer and say 1-1. I think that it's very hard for us to predict Everton to lose, obviously. And I think sometimes you predict draws in absences of predicting losses. So I think a 1-1. I just think that if they're organised, they turn up, they do their job. I think what we've talked about with Jack Grealish this season as well, by the way, because I don't feel we've mentioned his name anywhere near as no enough on this podcast, is that he elevates the squad, particularly the mentality. And I think he won't be as phased about rocking up at Anfield because he's done it and taken points there with City. I think that he'll be the calm in the dressing room that maybe is needed for some of these other players that are new to the Merseyside Derby as well. So we got a bit of a chance here to not let it phase us and have people like Jack Grealish pull us up and pull us through. So yeah, I'll go 1-1 out. And yeah, you can either be more optimistic or more pessimistic. I'll take middle of the road.
Um, yeah, I completely agree about Grealish. We've always got a goal in us if you've got someone like Grealish in the team, and not just because of ability, like mentality wise, as you say. Um, I'm gonna be a bit boring and agree with you. I'm gonna say 1-1 as well.
Okay.
I'm just gonna hope that I could even see it being a case where we actually go ahead
Mm,
and they pick us off late on. Because obviously a lot has been made about just how late they're scoring this season. Every game they've won, they've scored in like the last 10 minutes of the game. Obviously, just off the back of recording this last night, they nicked it late on against Atletico as well in added time. Um, Hopefully Moyes doesn't start on any of their fans. We don't need any of that like Simeone did, but
yeah, that was wild. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think 1-1 would definitely do me. A draw would absolutely do me. We said last week we'd be happy with just 1 point out of these two games against Villa at Liverpool.
Yeah, absolutely.
2 points would be really sound going.
Dreamland. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, heady heights. Going into the last two of this month. Um, so, funnily enough, and I promise this isn't scripted, but you have just mentioned an old game, and as we move on to the lineup quiz to round
Amazing.
this one off, yeah, I have indeed picked yeah the game you just mentioned all those years ago. I won't mention the player in which you described it. Obviously that's at least one you're gonna get. I'd like to think
Yeah.
so.
1 out of 11's
Yeah.
locked in.
But so yeah, 1-1 draw. September 11 years ago, it all seemed to line up, and I thought with Liverpool scoring all these late goals recently, I thought I'd go for one where we scored late on instead for a change. Not
Oh,
quite on the
great.
level of the Tarkowski one last season, I don't think. I think that was
Do
genuinely
you not think interest? That's a
ah
debate for another pod, Al. That's a debate for another pod.
oh
I
no
nearly
no
broke my parents' living room in that game. Like,
being Eric Goodison for that just alone elevates it for me to another level. But yeah, another conversation for another day.
yeah.
Hit me with your lineup. Go on.
Okay, so I'm going to do this a little bit obscure because this was a Roberto Martinez Everton team, wasn't
Yep,
it? So I'm going to go double header straight off the bat here with Gareth Barry and James McCarthy.
yep, very nice.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so we've got Barry and McCarthy. I'm going to go obviously Jagielka because he scored the goal.
Yeah,
John Stones would have played in that game as
he
well.
did.
Yeah. I'm go oh difficult. It's a difficult one with the wingers, wasn't it? I'm gonna go Baines. I think Baines was still playing in that
Baines
one.
played. Yep, that's five.
Yeah. And then do we go Cole? I'm gonna go Coleman.
So Coleman wasn't in the side, which makes me think he
Oh,
must have been
poor.
injured.
Must have been injured. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. And then let's go further up the pitch. I'm gonna say Stephen Naismith. He would have been on the bench if he
Naismith
didn't
played.
play.
Naismith
He
started.
played. Okay. Naismith started. Interesting. Who were our wingers around that time? God. Oh, this is where it gets difficult now. That kit, by the way, was a really underrated Umbro
Mm.
home shirt. That one, I really liked that kit. It's just a case of who wore it and who wore it up front as well. Um, it's whether Naismith played in the 10 as well, or whether he would have played as the striker. I don't really know. I'm gonna go Lukaku. That
Yeah, Lukaku played. Yep.
obviously, yeah, okay, nice. So we've got the wingers and we've got the goalkeeper and the right back. That was a weird transitional goalkeeping situation, wasn't it? I'm gonna go Tim Howard, but
Yep. Tim Howard
yeah, it
played.
was Howard. Okay, nice. Maybe I'm making this look harder than it is. So who was our right back then if Seamus Coleman was injured? That's a question. So we've got the right back and the two wingers that I've got to try and get here. Oh, oh no, this might be a loss of life. Gerard Deulofeu.
Nope.
No.
That was the kind of in between season. So we had him on loan Martinez's first season, then he didn't come back, and then we signed him permanently in 2015. So
Okay, so
so
I've got
you
one
want
life and
one
three
life
to
left.
get.
Yeah.
Oh no. Um, Goodness me. Okay. Really am drawing a blank on those wingers. And even the right back situation, unless no, I was gonna say unless did John Stones play at right back and he had another centre back playing, but I don't think that would have been the case. Poor no, this is gonna get into like free hit territory here. I feel like I'm missing someone really obvious, Al. Like this, well, I'm probably missing three very obvious names, but um,
I think the two hardest ones you haven't got, but yeah, one of the ones you haven't got is very gettable. So don't give up
oh,
hope just yet.
do you know what? I'm gonna go. Oh no, no, I'm not. I was gonna go. Who was our 11? Oh, Aidan McGeady.
So Aidan McGeady came on as a sub.
No,
So he came on as a sub
no.
30 minutes into the game, and the winger you haven't got must have gone off injured. But that's not a
Oh,
life loss, so you're still in.
would Ross Barkley have played that season?
So he would have, but not in this game. Wasn't on the
No,
bench.
no.
Must have been injured. So yeah, that's a very good effort from you. To be fair, that's 8 out of 11. I would have struggled with this because
High score for me, I think.
these sort of seasons are kind of my a bit of a grey spot for me. Um, so you missed Morales. That's probably the most obvious one. You
Yeah, that's a
probably should have
shame.
got.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, Naismith must have been the other winger because we've got three centre midfielders here. You said two of them, and you missed Mo Bezic in the
oh wow,
midfield.
okay.
And then at right back, I think a lot of people kind of forget he was still around at this point, but Tony Hibbert actually started in that game for us. Um,
Wild.
and he got subbed off for this lad who I remember made his debut. And at this time, his name was Ty Browning. But he's obviously now he's got a Chinese name. If you're aware of this,
Oh yeah,
he's
yeah.
gone over to China. And he's got Chinese citizenship, so his name's changed now. I'm not gonna don't know what it is. I'm not even gonna
Brilliant.
try and guess. Or even if I did know, I probably wouldn't try and pronounce it. But so that's 8 out of 11. Very solid thing. We'll
Take
quickly run
that.
through the subs as we're running out of time a little bit here. But you've got Joe Robles, Anthony
Yeah.
Alcaraz, Ty Browning, as you said, Darren Gibson, Aidan McGeady, Leon Osman, and Samuel Eto'o came on for the last 10 minutes. Just
Love that.
as a crazy one.
Martin
So
has had to manage Samuel Eto'o and Tony Hibbert. Let that sink in.
unbelievable, like his most distinguished teammate, I'm sure. But yeah, so we'll quickly wrap up here. Thank you very much for joining me. Hopefully next week we'll have some sort of positive derby result to dissect. But please leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment below, giving your thoughts ahead of Liverpool. Subscribe to Toffee channel for more Everton content, and we will see you in the next video. Up the Toffees.